Some people evolve slowly. INFJs don't. One day they simply wake up and step into a version of themselves nobody was prepared for. Not louder, not colder, just clearer. And that clarity changes everything. The people who once underestimated them start realizing they were never dealing with who the INFJ truly is, only with the version who is still learning, still healing, still holding back parts of themselves to make others comfortable. INFJs grow in silence. They transform quietly. Their breakthroughs happen behind the scenes, in late-night reflection, in moments of emotional honesty, in the spaces where they finally choose themselves. And when that growth finally shows, it shocks everyone who thought they understood them. They become calmer, stronger, more intuitive, more selective, more grounded in who they are. And that is when people begin to fear losing them because their energy becomes something rare, something irreplaceable. What people don't realize is this: INFJs don't become harder, they become purer. They stop carrying dead weight. They stop explaining their heart. They stop shrinking to fit environments that were never meant for them. Their growth turns them into someone others admire, respect, and suddenly feel terrified to lose. Because the INFJ no longer stays where their soul feels small. If this resonated, drop evolution in the comments. Let me see the ones who are growing quietly but powerfully. And if you're new here, subscribe for more psychology and INFJ depth. You're becoming someone unforgettable. Don't hide it. They stop living for approval and start living in alignment with their true self. There comes a moment in an INFJ's life when the quiet weight they've carried for years, the pressure to please, to soften themselves, to fit into spaces that never respected their depth, finally breaks. It doesn't happen in anger or dramatic rebellion. It happens in silence, a deep internal shift, like a door gently closing behind them. They wake up one day realizing they have poured entire chapters of their life into keeping others comfortable while abandoning parts of themselves that were never meant to be hidden. And that realization becomes the first spark of transformation. For the first time, they choose to listen to their inner compass instead of external noise. They stop shaping their words to avoid discomfort. They stop shrinking to be relatable. They stop apologizing for seeing the world differently, and instead they begin to honor their own truth, the truth they always felt but never fully lived. As this awakening unfolds, the INFJ starts paying attention to the small moments where their soul whispers the loudest, the conversations that leave them empty, the relationships that feel like emotional debt, the environments that drain more than they nourish. They begin to understand that seeking approval is a slow form of self-abandonment, and they've practiced it for far too long. So they withdraw their energy from anything that demands their compliance instead of respecting their authenticity. It's subtle at first, fewer explanations, more boundaries, more silence where they once offered reassurance. But the shift deepens quickly. They turn their focus inward, recognizing that pleasing others is not the same as being connected to them. And for once, they stop negotiating their worth in rooms that never valued it. With this clarity, they begin aligning their life with who they truly are, not who the world taught them to be. Their decisions become cleaner, their voice steadier, their presence more rooted. They discover that approval was never security, it was a cage disguised as acceptance. And when they release the need for permission, the world that once controlled them loses its grip. They start choosing environments that match their sensitivity, people who honor their depth, and paths that reflect their purpose. This alignment doesn't make them colder, it makes them stronger, not harder, but clearer. And in that clarity, they become unrecognizable, not because they changed into someone new, but because they finally returned to the person they were always meant to be. They recognize unhealthy patterns instantly and cut ties without hesitation. There comes a point in an INFJ's growth where their intuition sharpens into something almost surgical. They no longer second-guess the discomfort that rises in their chest when someone's words don't match their energy, or when a relationship begins to feel like a repeated chapter they've already outgrown. Instead of explaining away red flags, they start seeing them as data, signals pointing to emotional patterns that once trapped them in cycles of overgiving and self-sacrifice. Where they once gave people just one more chance, they now recognize the difference difference between a mistake and a personality. They can tell when someone's kindness is strategic, when someone's apology is performance, and when someone's presence drains more life than it gives. And this time, they don't stay to justify it, they don't stay to fix it, they don't stay to understand it, they simply walk away. This shift isn't cold or impulsive, it's clarity. It's years of emotional wisdom finally taking its rightful place at the front of their decision-making. INFJs begin to understand that repeating a pattern is a choice, and choosing themselves requires cutting ties with anything that echoes old wounds. The moment they notice manipulation wrapped in charm, or inconsistency hidden behind excuses, something inside them goes still. They no longer confront people or beg for honesty, they observe, they understand, and they detach with a kind of silent finality that shocks anyone who mistook their patience for weakness. They stop investing emotional labor into relationships built on imbalance, they stop negotiating their needs just to keep the peace, and they stop romanticizing potential at the cost of their well-being. What makes this transformation powerful is that INFJs don't leave with anger, they leave with certainty. There is no dramatic exit, no emotional outburst, no attempt to prove their point. The door closes softly, but permanently. And for the first time, the INFJ feels the weight lifting from their mind, replaced by a calm that comes from honoring their boundaries without apology. They realize that protecting their peace is not selfish, it's survival. And when they cut ties now, it's not to punish anyone, it's to preserve the version of themselves they fought so hard to grow into. And once they walk away, there is no return because the person they are becoming no longer fits inside the patterns they finally chose to break. They master emotional boundaries. Kindness remains, but access changes. As INFJs grow into their truest selves, one of the most defining shifts is how they protect their emotional world. They don't become harsh, distant, or unkind. If anything, their compassion deepens. But they no longer offer that compassion without discernment. For most of their early life, they were open doors, listening without limits, giving without pause, absorbing emotions that were never theirs to carry. They believed that kindness meant availability, that love meant endurance, and that empathy required self-sacrifice. But experience teaches them something crucial. Without boundaries, even the purest heart becomes exhausted. So instead of changing their kindness, they change who has access to it. They stop allowing just anyone to step into their inner space. They stop explaining their feelings to people who have no intention of understanding them. They stop giving emotional bandwidth to relationships that never give anything back. This mastery doesn't happen overnight. It happens through a series of small awakenings. They notice how drained they feel after certain conversations. They pay attention to the emptiness that follows one-sided relationships. They recognize how often they've shown up for people who never showed up for them. And slowly they begin shifting their boundaries from a place of instinctive empathy to deliberate preservation. They speak less, listen intentionally, and give only what feels sustainable. They learn to say no without guilt, not now without panic, and this is not for me without apology. And with each boundary they honor, their energy becomes clearer, stronger, and more protected. What surprises people the most is that the INFJ's warmth doesn't disappear, it becomes refined. They remain gentle, understanding, and deeply perceptive, but they no longer allow their heart to be a place where others come to heal while offering nothing in return. Their boundaries create a new version of them, still compassionate, but no longer accessible to chaos, still empathetic, but no longer emotionally available to anyone who drains them, still loving, but no longer willing to abandon themselves to love others. This shift makes the INFJ feel unfamiliar, almost unrecognizable to those who once benefited from their lack of boundaries. But to the INFJ, it feels like coming home. Because emotional boundaries don't harden them, they free them. They finally have the space to grow, to breathe, to choose relationships that nourish instead of deplete. And in protecting their heart, they become someone people never imagined. Someone grounded, strong, and impossible to take for granted. They evolve spiritually and mentally faster than the people around them can comprehend. INFJs don't grow the way most people do, slowly, outwardly, or in predictable stages. Their evolution happens quietly, internally, through layers of introspection that others rarely witness. While everyone else is focused on noise, achievement, and validation, the INFJ is studying the unseen, their own patterns, their wounds, their purpose, their intuition, the meaning behind every emotional shift. What looks like stillness from the outside is actually transformation in progress. They shed limiting beliefs the way trees shed leaves, naturally, consistently, without asking permission. Their mind connects dots most people don't even notice. Their spirit gravitates toward truth without needing proof. Their intuition deepens with every experience, sharpening their sense of who they are and who they're becoming. And because this growth happens beneath the surface, the world only notices when the INFJ emerges changed. People around them often struggle to understand this transformation. One day, the INFJ seems familiar, predictable in their sensitivity, loyal in their support, cautious in their expression. And then suddenly, almost overnight, they appear clearer, wiser, more grounded, more uncompromising. It isn't a sudden shift, it's the visible result of months or years of silent evolution. They stop accepting the roles others assigned them. They stop tolerating emotional immaturity. They stop living according to expectations that never reflected their truth. Instead, they step into a version of themselves aligned with deeper understanding, spiritual, emotional, intuitive, self-aware. Others may call it cold, different, or changed, but the INFJ knows it's simply growth taking its rightful place. This accelerated evolution sets them apart in a way that can feel isolating but empowering. They see through manipulation faster. They identify toxic patterns early. They understand emotional dynamics long before anyone else realizes what's happening. They grow out of environments and relationships that others cling to. And because they evolve at a pace fueled by introspection rather than external approval, they become impossible to box in, control, or predict. This can intimidate people who preferred the earlier version of them, the version who stayed small to keep others comfortable. But the INFJ's transformation isn't about leaving people behind. It's about rising into the self they were always meant to be. Their evolution is a quiet revolution, one that reshapes their boundaries, strengthens their intuition, and sharpens their purpose. And when the world finally sees the new version of them, it often feels like they've become someone entirely different, when in reality, they simply stopped dimming the brilliance they carried all along. They begin trusting their intuition fully, making them impossible to manipulate. For most of their early life, INFJs second-guess their inner voice. They sense things long before they can logically explain them. The shift in someone's tone, the hidden motive behind a smile, the emotional weight in a room that everyone else seems blind to. Yet they often silence this intuition to avoid conflict or to give people the benefit of the doubt. But eventually, experience becomes their evidence. Every time their intuition warned them and they ignored it, life showed them the consequences. Every time they felt a quiet no in their chest but said yes out of guilt or politeness, they paid the emotional price. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something changes. They begin to trust themselves more than they trust anyone's words. This is the moment manipulation stops working, because the INFJ no longer listens to masks, excuses, or performances. They listen to the truth beneath them. When an INFJ fully steps into their intuitive power, they become emotionally untouchable. They can read intention before it's spoken, sense deceit before it unfolds, detect red flags others haven't even noticed. The charm that once fooled them now appears transparent. The manipulation that once confused them now feels predictable. They no longer wait for proof to validate their instincts. Their inner signals are enough. And the shift is profound, because people who once relied on their empathy to take advantage suddenly find themselves facing someone who sees straight through them. The INFJ doesn't argue, doesn't accuse, doesn't need confrontation. They simply withdraw their energy, close the emotional door, and walk away with a clarity that leaves manipulators stunned. This trust in intuition also transforms how they navigate relationships and environments. Instead of forcing connections, they flow toward alignment. Instead of tolerating discomfort, they investigate its source. Instead of drowning in emotional noise, they follow the quiet guidance within them. They make decisions faster, cleaner, and with more conviction. They no longer fear being wrong because they've learned that intuition isn't about perfection, it's about perception. And perception is the one place where INFJs have always excelled. As this inner confidence grows, they become impossible to sway or control. Manipulators depend on confusion, self-doubt, and emotional openings. But the INFJ now closes those doors before anyone realizes they were even unlocked. Their insight becomes a shield, their clarity a boundary, their intuition a compass that never points them toward anything that isn't real. And when they finally live from this place of inner truth, they step into a version of themselves that is unshakable, guided, grounded, and utterly immune to the illusions that once held power over them. They transform pain into clarity, leaving behind the version of themselves shaped by trauma. There comes a moment in an INFJ's life when the weight they've carried for years finally becomes too familiar to ignore. The disappointments, the betrayals, the misunderstandings, all the emotional bruises that once defined how they moved through the world suddenly reveal themselves as lessons rather than wounds. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens quietly, often during long stretches of solitude, where the mind finally has enough space to breathe. In that silence, the INFJ begins connecting the dots, the patterns and people they tolerated for too long, the situations they endured out of loyalty, the parts of themselves they dimmed just to make others comfortable. Their pain becomes a mirror, and for the first time, they truly look into it. And what they see isn't a broken person, but someone who survived everything meant to break them, someone wiser, sharper, and more self-aware than they ever realized. With that realization comes a powerful shift. The INFJ stops trying to fix what was never theirs to fix. They stop internalizing the chaos around them and start asking themselves what the pain was trying to teach. Every heartbreak becomes a message. Every betrayal becomes clarity. Every emotional scar becomes a roadmap, showing them exactly where they abandoned themselves and where they need to reclaim their strength. They no longer view their past as something that damaged them, but as something that forged them. And slowly, the version of themselves created by trauma begins to fall away. The anxious one who overthought every interaction, the overly accommodating one who feared disappointing others, the quiet, apologetic presence who made themselves small to avoid conflict. Those versions dissolve as the INFJ steps into a deeper, more grounded identity. The transformation is subtle to the outside world, but monumental within. They speak with more conviction, they choose with more confidence, they protect their peace with an ease that confuses people who once expected unlimited access to them. Their intuition sharpens, their emotional boundaries strengthen, and the guilt that once kept them tied to unhealthy situations starts to fade. They stop seeking answers in the people who hurt them and begin finding them in the wisdom they've gathered through experience. Pain no longer defines them, it informs them. And by the time the INFJ emerges from this transformation, they are unrecognizable to anyone who only knew their wounded version. They carry themselves differently, calmer, clearer, impossible to manipulate. They become someone who no longer reacts from fear or past trauma, but responds from a place of truth and self-respect. This is the moment they truly become themselves. And it's the moment others realize they can never be approached the same way again. They become highly selective with their energy. Only truth and depth get close. There comes a stage in an INFJ's evolution where their intuition becomes so sharp, their emotional clarity so refined, that they no longer tolerate anything that drains, confuses, or diminishes them. It's not a conscious decision at first. It's a quiet shift. They begin noticing how certain conversations leave them feeling heavier, how some connections demand energy but offer nothing meaningful in return, how being too available gives people the illusion that access to their heart is effortless. Slowly, they withdraw that access, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. They realize their energy is not an endless resource. It is sacred, powerful, and easily misused by those who don't understand its value. And for the first time, they choose to guard it fiercely. This newfound selectiveness shows up in subtle ways. They stop entertaining relationships built on convenience rather than authenticity. They no longer tolerate emotional half-truths or connections that feel shallow. They pull back from people who want their empathy but not their truth, who want comfort without accountability. The INFJ begins to feel the difference between someone who genuinely wants to understand them and someone who simply wants to benefit from their depth. And when that recognition becomes clear, they stop pouring their energy into people who only skim the surface. Their circle becomes smaller but richer. Their conversations become fewer but more meaningful. Every interaction is filtered through one question: does this connection honor my peace or disrupt it? What surprises people the most is how calm the INFJ is during this transition. There is no dramatic exit, no harsh announcement of boundaries. Their energy simply shifts. They observe more, speak less, and allow the truth in others to reveal itself naturally. They become impossible to guilt trip, impossible to manipulate, impossible to emotionally exhaust. The INFJ's presence becomes firmer, their intuition quieter but sharper, and their trust harder to earn, not because they're closed off, but because they've finally learned the cost of giving too much to people who give too little. And when the INFJ does let someone close, it is intentional, it is earned, it is real. They give depth to those who can meet it, honesty to those who can hold it, and loyalty to those who have proven themselves worthy of it. Their selectiveness becomes a form of self-respect, a shield built from every lesson they've ever learned. People may struggle to understand this change, but the INFJ no longer bends to be understood. They choose only what aligns with their truth, and in that choice, they become untouchable. They step into their power quietly, becoming someone people never imagined until it's too late. INFJs don't rise with noise, they rise with clarity. Their transformation doesn't happen in a dramatic moment or a loud declaration. It happens in silence, in the private spaces where they finally confront their own truth. For years, they absorb, observe, and endure. They carry the weight of expectations, emotional chaos, and their own longing to be understood. But growth has a habit of arriving quietly, and one day, without warning, something shifts inside them. Once it's happening, they stop shrinking, they stop apologizing, they stop trying to fit into places that never honored their depth, and in that stillness, they step into a version of themselves that feels inevitable, the self they were always meant to become. Their power emerges not from dominance, but from alignment. They learn to trust the voice they once doubted, the intuition that whispers before the world speaks, the emotional radar that sees motives beneath masks, the inner compass that has always guided them toward truth. And once they fully trust that inner world, they become unshakable. They begin making decisions based on clarity rather than fear. They choose peace over approval. They choose solitude over company that dilutes their spirit. They choose honesty over comfort. People who once underestimated them start sensing the shift, but they can't quite identify what changed. Only that the INFJ no longer bends, no longer wavers, no longer dims themselves to make others feel brighter. What makes this transformation so powerful is how quietly it unfolds. The INFJ doesn't announce their evolution, they embody it. They move differently, intentional, calm, unreadable. Their boundaries grow sharper, their standards rise, and their tolerance for emotional inconsistency disappears entirely. The people who once relied on their softness begin to feel distance where comfort used to be. The ones who took advantage of their empathy begin to feel exposed in their presence. The INFJ doesn't seek revenge, doesn't argue, doesn't explain. Their growth becomes the response. Their silence becomes the closure. Their new strength becomes the consequence. And by the time others finally recognize the depth, certainty, and quiet power the INFJ has stepped into, it's already too late to return to who they once were. The INFJ has evolved beyond the version of themselves that tolerated less than they deserved. They become someone rare, calm but powerful, compassionate but firm, intuitive but grounded, someone unforgettable, someone impossible to replace, someone who finally understands that their true power was never meant to be loud, only undeniable. In the end, INFJs don't rise by becoming louder, they rise by becoming truer. Their transformation isn't about impressing anyone, it's about finally coming home to themselves, and when they do, the shift is unmistakable. Their peace becomes their power, their intuition becomes their shield, their depth becomes their identity. And everyone who once overlooked them suddenly realizes they were evolving right in front of them. If you're still here, it means this message spoke to something deep inside you, something real. So here's my question for you. What's one change you made this year that brought you closer to your true self? Drop the word ascend in the comments so I know you felt this to the end, and subscribe for more content that understands your depth, your journey, and your transformation. Your evolution is just beginning.